Hello from Freedomtax Accounting. My name is Carlos. Today we are going to talk about PPP loan forgiveness for partnerships. It is very important that you note that I am recording this video on May 13th. That is important because the SBA guidelines for PPP forgiveness has been constantly changing. So there are things that may change, some little details. Okay, so that is important for you to know. Now, if you don't know us, we are part of Freedom Group. We are a group of 4 companies that we have CPAs, EAs, financial advisors, insurance agents, immigration attorneys, real estate pros that have more than 20 years of experience, so we can help you in many ways. Okay, so let's get talking about PPP forgiveness for partnerships. First of all, partnerships can be tricky for PPP. Okay, so it's very important that if you are working with the CPA, consult with your CPA your specific case. It especially depends on the type of partners that are on the partnership. Okay, how do you know on a partnership there can be different types of partners? There can be a general partner, domestic partner, limited partner, foreign partner. So you need to check what type of partner you are on your partnership. So where do you check that? If you take a look at the K-1 from your partnership, here you see the different options you have for being a partner. Okay, the most common are general and domestic partners. Okay, so if you are not a general partner or a domestic partner, this video is not for you. In this video, we're going to take the most common types of partnerships, which are general partner and domestic partner. Okay, also, if your partnership had payroll, meaning that in 2019 you had employees that you gave them a W-2, this video is not for you. Okay, because the way PPP works for partnerships that have payroll is different. Okay, but most partnerships usually don't have payroll. Okay, now who does this video apply to? Partnerships are usually multi-member LLCs. You have an LLC that have 2 or more members, and your multi-member LLC files taxes under Form 1065. Okay. Now, you don't necessarily need to have a multi-member LLC to file as a partnership. It can be 2 or more individuals that are doing some kind of business together, but this is very rare. Out of all the years that we've been doing this, I think I've only seen 1 partnership that is not a multi-member LLC. But basically the way you check if you are a partnership or not is how you file your business taxes. If you file this Form 1065 for your business taxes, that means that you are considered a partnership. So there's 5 steps that we're going to discuss today about the 5 steps for PPP forgiveness for your partnership. Step number 1, you got to make sure you have the correct PPP loan amount. Step number 2, you have to figure out the owner compensation amount that's for forgiveness. You have to calculate the other expenses that qualify for forgiveness. Step 4, you need to quantify into your forgiveness equation your EIDL grant. And step number 5, you need to get your forgiveness application. So let's go into step 1. You need to make sure that you got the correct PPP loan amount. The last several weeks that we've been working with a lot of clients, we've seen that some partnerships, and not even partnerships, even self-employed or businesses that applied for PPP, the lender gave them higher PPP loan amounts that were allowed by the SBA guidelines. Now, this could have happened for a lot of reasons. We think that, remember that the PPP application for the loan was handled by the banks and the lenders. It wasn't handled by the SBA. The SBA gave them the guidelines, but the actual lenders and banks were the ones processing the application. We feel that banks made mistakes, or they simply were not prepared to calculate correctly the PPP loan amount, and that they just went with whatever you gave them. So if you need to verify that the PPP loan amount that you got is actually the one that was allowed for you to get. Why is this important? Because at the end of the 8-week period, after you have received your PPP funds, you're going to have to go through a loan forgiveness process, and they will go deeper into your documents. So the things that they didn't review well when you applied, they will review them deeper for the forgiveness, especially now that a couple of weeks have gone by, and they're gonna know better the guidelines, and they're gonna be better prepared. Okay, so first step is to calculate what is the PPP loan amount that you are allowed by the SBA program, and you need to make a 8-week budget with the correct PPP loan amount that you should have received, and not with the higher amount you got. So how do we do this? How do we calculate your correct PPP loan amount? Well, first step is you need to add line 14 of all K-1s up to $100,000 per K-1. You need to divide that by 12, and you need to multiply that by 2.5, and that is your correct PPP loan amount. Once again, let's go to the K-1. So in a partnership, you have 2 or more Schedule K forms that they should be inside your 1065 business tax return. On your K-1, you have the owner's name, but you have to look at line 14. So whatever number is here, you need to add them up. If you have 2 K-1s, then you add whatever is here in all the K-1s up to $100,000. So if you have more than $100,000 in this line, you can only use $100,000 for the formula. Okay, now important, this is the line you're going to use to add up all the K-1s, but check your K-1 to see if you have a number on line 4A. If you have a number here, talk to your CPA immediately. Okay, there are several reasons why you have a number here. It may be that you are on payroll, but usually if you have a number here, you should discuss with your CPA, because most of the time you should be an S corp instead of a partnership, but that's not on every case. So if you see a number on line 4A, talk to your CPA, because the PPP loan amount is going to be different for you. But for this example, in most cases, we're going to use the number on line 14. So if we go back to this here, so once again, you add all on line 14, you add them up, divide by 12, multiply by 2.5, that is your PPP loan amount, And if you see a number on line 4A, consult with your CPA. Now let's look at an example. Let's say that we have a partnership with two members. So we have two K1s. K1 number 1 on line 14 is $30,000. Partner number 2, line 14, on his K1 is $30,000. So the total sum of the K1s on line 14 is $60,000. So you take that $60,000, divide by 12, multiply by 2.5, so you get $12,500. This is the correct PPP loan amount that you should have received from your lender. Now remember about the cap of the $100,000? Let's look at an example. Let's say that you have a member that line 14 on the K1 says $120,000, but member number 2, line 14, says $50,000. If you add these two up, you get $170,000, but you can only use $150,000 because this partner that has $120,000, you can only use $100,000. So you need to add $100,000 plus $50,000. So $150,000 is the number you use for the PPP formula. So you take $150,000, divide by 12, you multiply by 2.5. So you get $31,250. This is the PPP loan amount. Okay? Now, if you got a higher PPP loan amount, then once you calculate your PPP loan amount and the bank or the lender gave you more, you need to prepare for those extra funds to not be forgiven. So remember, you need to make an 8-week expense budget with the correct PPP loan amount. Now remember that the 8 weeks start from the date you received the funds. It's not when you applied. So the date the funds got to your bank account, that's where the 8-week period starts. So remember, calculate your correct PPP loan amount, and the reason we need to confirm this is that we've seen a lot of examples and a lot of clients that the banks have calculated their PPP amount wrong and they have received a higher amount than they were allowed to. Now, step number 2, you need to calculate your owner compensation that is allowable for forgiveness. Okay? PPP forgiveness guidelines are still not clear, but since the SBA is using self-employment earnings from the K1 to calculate the PPP loan amount, it would make sense to apply the same PPP forgiveness rules that applied for self-employed, but to partnerships. Why do I say that? Let's go back to your K1. In order to calculate your PPP on your K1, you added up line 14. See here it says self-employment earnings. So that's why we feel that the same PPP forgiveness principles that apply for self-employed will apply for partnerships as well. So how do we calculate the owner compensation forgiveness under partnership? Once again, you add line 14 of all the K1s up to $100,000 per K1, but now you divide that by 52 and you multiply by 8, and this is the amount of 8 weeks worth of owner compensation. Let's give an example with the same we gave on the prior slide. We have owner number 1 with a K1 line 14 of $30,000, partner number 2, K1 line 14, $30,000. So the total sum of the K1s, line 14, is $60,000. So you take $60,000, divide by 52, multiply by 8. That gives you $9,250. $230.77. This is 8 weeks worth of owner compensation. So this is the amount based on your 2019 tax return. This is the amount of income owners make on an 8-week period. Now, the guidelines suggest, and the language is pretty ambiguous, but the guideline does suggest that this amount will be automatically forgiven. But since the guidelines are still not clear, we are advising our clients to have a plan B. This amount of owner compensation amount, it's supposed to be your payroll for the owners. And I say payroll because you're actually not on payroll, but that's what the owners should pay themselves in an 8-week period. Now, even though it is suggested that this will be automatically forgiven, since every lender is going to have their own requirements for forgiveness, we are advising our clients to take this amount, put it on a separate bank account. Take the total PPP loan amount. In this case, it'll be the $12,500. Take that amount and put it into a separate bank account. And on an 8-week period, make transfers from that account where you have the PPP funds to the owner's personal bank accounts. And you have 8 weeks to transfer this amount. You can split this up in 8 weeks and do a weekly transfer. I don't know if making one transfer would fly, so I would try to split it up. Now, once again, this is something that we are just taking a precaution just in case the bank requires evidence that the owners paid themselves this amount. But the guideline does suggest that this will be automatically forgiven and that you won't have to show proof. But just in case, use Plan B. Take your PPP loan, put it in a separate bank account, and this owner compensation amount, you have 8 weeks to transfer from that account that you have the PPP funds to the two members' personal bank accounts. I would split this up in 8 weeks and do a weekly transfer. But once again, that's our recommendation. It may not be something you have to do, but I would better be prepared, and if the new guidelines come down, then we will update the video. Now, step 3 is to calculate the other expenses that qualify for forgiveness. Let's take the example we are working with. The PPP loan amount was $12,500, and we already calculated that the owner compensation for 8 weeks was $9,230.77. That means that we have $3,270 of a balance that can be used for other forgiveness qualifying expenses in 8 weeks. So you take your PPP loan amount, you subtract your owner compensation for the 8 weeks, the remaining balance. In order for this to get forgiven, you have to use it on mortgage interest, but the mortgage must have been signed before February 15th, 2020. You can use these funds to pay rent, but the rental lease agreement must have been signed before February 15th, 2020. And you can also use it for business utilities, like you can pay energy, water, internet, and telephones that are for the business, for the partnership. Okay, so if you use these funds for these expenses, they will be forgiven as well. Now, step 4 is to calculate your EIDL amount. Now, EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. When PPP and EIDL came out, the EIDL was very popular. A lot of people applied for it. But you have to remember that the EIDL has two parts. You have the EIDL grant and you have the EIDL loan. When you applied for EIDL, you could have received a grant that they gave you up front, and that grant was up to $10,000. When this came out, a lot of people thought that they were going to get $10,000 as a grant. Then the SBA clarified and said, we're going to give $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So we have a lot of people who applied for the grant that got $1,000 for one owner, two owners, $2,000, or based on the number of employees. Now that grant, you don't have to pay back as a loan to the SBA. But later on, the SBA may have reached out to you and telling you, we gave you this grant, but now we have evaluated your case, and now we are offering you a loan. And you can accept or reject that loan. And that loan amount, basically they're going to make you an offer based on the numbers you filled out the EIDL application. Okay? I'm going to be very honest. Out of the almost over 300 EIDL applications we've done, I've only seen 4 clients that have received an EIDL loan offer. A lot of people have not received the EIDL loan offer, but many of them have received the EIDL grant. Now, why is this important? Because if you got your PPP funds and you got the EIDL grant, the amount you got from the grant will be subtracted from the PPP loan forgiveness amount. And whatever you got from the EIDL grant is going to turn over to a PPP loan that's unforgiven, 1% interest for 2 years. So if you did get EIDL grant, know that that amount, either you're going to have to give it back to the lender that gave you the PPP, or that amount will not be forgiven and will become a 1% loan for 2 years. Now, if you did get the EIDL loan, you can use the PPP and the EIDL loan, and it will not affect your PPP forgiveness, but you cannot use the EIDL loan funds and the PPP for the same expenses. That's the key. So, if you got EIDL loan, the PPP and the EIDL loan funds cannot be used toward the same expenses. So the best practice is to use PPP for payroll expenses, or in this case, owner compensation, as a partnership, and use the EIDL loan funds for other working capital. This will ensure that you get the PPP forgiven while still covering your business expenses. Now, step 5, this is the last step. Get your hands on your PPP forgiveness application. Remember that you got the funds. After 8 weeks, you have to start submitting your PPP forgiveness application with your lender. It's not with the SBA. The PPP forgiveness application is going to be with your lender. I recommend that you start communicating with your lender and get your hands on that forgiveness application. Don't wait till the end of the 8 weeks. Start communicating with your lender now. Why? we feel that each lender is going to have their own specific requirements for forgiveness. Now, all lenders, they do have to abide by the SBA forgiveness rules, but every lender may have different ways of doing forgiveness. They may ask for different documentation. They may ask for different type of proof. But the sooner you get your hands on the forgiveness application, the better you can plan for it. Okay? At least start opening a channel of communication. Get to know someone at your lender, at the bank, someone that can help you, somebody you can talk to on the phone, somebody you can start communicating by email. That way, when you start your PPP forgiveness application, you're not a total stranger. You have someone there that knows you. So I think this step is very critical, and unfortunately, as of today, May 13th, a lot of my clients have called the lenders. The lenders tell them, we don't have any idea how forgiveness is going to work, but keep communicating with them because they should have the PPP forgiveness application form ready soon. All right. Now, what happens if you go through all this process and a certain percentage of the funds don't get forgiven? You do the best you can, you make the best plans, but for some reason or another, you have a portion of your PPP loan that doesn't get forgiven. So, and at the end of the 8 weeks that you start your forgiveness application process, the lender has up to 60 days to determine if you are eligible for forgiveness. Once the lender gives you the details of what portion has been forgiven and what hasn't, you have two options. You can give the unforgiven balance back to the lender, and that's it. Or the unforgiven balance becomes a 2-year loan at a 1% interest, which is still a good deal. That's even better than a credit card. But know that those are the options you are going to have. Now, what tips do we offer to our clients that are partnerships that got the PPP loan? We are advising our clients to deposit the PPP funds into a separate bank account. That is not the bank account that you use for your business operation. That way is going to be better and for you to show the lender what you used the funds for. Very important, keep records, invoices, payment receipts of all the expenses that you paid with your PPP funds for the 8-week period. The lender will ask for all this documentation. That's why we feel that you better start working with your CPA now. Talk to your CPA, start working with your accountant. Don't leave this work for the end of the 8 weeks. Start making a plan, because we feel that if the PPP application process was hard, we feel that the PPP forgiveness process is going to be even harder. So start working with your CPA so you can plan and prepare for your PPP forgiveness. If you need help, we're working remotely. We're working via email, WhatsApp, Zoom, Skype, phone, everything except in person, to protect our staff and to protect our clients. This is our contact information if you need help. Thank you for listening to this video. God bless you. We're praying for you. We are trusting in our Lord Jesus Christ that He is in control and that we can rest knowing that He is protecting us. I cannot advise to read Psalm 91 of the Bible. There's a lot of good promises for God's people there. But once again, this is our contact information. Thank you, and God bless you. Have a great day. Bye.